America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
And it is hard to believe, but today is our 25th episode. So if you haven't listened to us yet, you can go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com. You can subscribe to the show and listen to new episodes every Wednesday and Thursday. So Alfredo, today we're going to be joined by Buz Koelbel, and Buz is the president of Koelbel and Company, one of the longest continually operating real estate companies in Colorado. The company's efforts are focused on development of office parks, master plan residential communities, and real estate investments. Buz's professional and civic involvement include serving 6 years as trustee of the Urban Land Institute, co-founder and vice chair of the Denver South Economic Development, and a past chair and board member of Colorado Council on Economic Education. So looking forward to hearing what he has to say about Colorado and real estate. But this week's going to be very exciting. There's two big things going on. The first is, of course, the first Republican presidential primary debate going on in Milwaukee. And the second is your trip to Iowa, which is very exciting. Although we know you're not running for president, you're going to what they call a field hearing. So tell us a little bit about that.
As you know, we've introduced the Prove It Act with Senator Ernst, basically. And that was one of our 8 points within our American Small Business Prosperity Plan. And so that is really a game changer, basically, because that's going to go a long ways. It's a step. It's not exactly where we want it to be, but it's definitely a step in the right direction to basically try to exempt, ultimately, small business owners from these ridiculous one-size-fits-all policies like Dodd-Frank, which is a best example that I can think of. You know, when that was implemented, 2,000 community banks went out of business because they just couldn't afford the cost, basically to stay current with everything that was being thrown at them and to stay compliant. And so we got to make sure that we do have, I think, an understanding of the impact on our small businesses with legislation that happens. And so this is pretty much what the Prove It Act helps to do. And so we're excited to hear the hearings and what the witnesses are going to say. And I'm honored to have been invited by Senator Ernst to be part of that.
Yeah, I think that's great. You mentioned our plan, the American Small Business Prosperity Plan. That is just been, I think, a real conversation starter, particularly with the House and Senate Small Business Committees. I think they've really appreciated the feedback that we provided to them, not only through our polling every month, but also in telling them these things in this very simple 8-point plan are what small business owners are telling us on a regular basis. Here's what we need. You know, we need the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to be permanent. We need to bring down energy costs by increasing domestic drilling. Regulations are, they're just a killer. So I'm so glad that you're headed to Iowa for this important hearing and to kind of be on the ground. I mean, a field hearing, how often do you hear of one of those happening? So I think that's exciting. There's a lot of other good things in there, like unclogging our supply chains, dealing with healthcare costs. I mean, it's not getting a lot of news right now, but healthcare is just a huge killer for our small businesses.
Right. And a couple things, too, that just to make sure we hit all the 8 points. You mentioned the supply chain issues in China, where we have, there, we need to get tougher on China. Reining in government spending to really help bring down inflation, expanding access to capital for our small businesses. And the nice thing is that there's some level of legislation that's going in each of these buckets now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a nice way to be able to kind of bundle these 8 points into the American Small Business Prosperity Plan, so the Americans, the average American can actually understand and see the vision of what our side has for our small businesses versus basically no vision from the Democrats other than demolishing small businesses.
Yeah, our small business owners were just so disproportionately hurt during the pandemic, and have continued to be hurt under the crushing tax of inflation and high energy prices. I really hope that we hear some questions on Wednesday night at the debate about small businesses. I hope the conversation goes there. I know that President Trump has officially announced that he's not going to be at the debate. So I'm hoping that they can focus on policy issues that impact small businesses.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, I can't really blame former President Trump for not being there. I don't think I would be there either. And if I was his advisor, I would advise him not to be there because, you're 35, 40 points away from your next best competitor. The only thing you're doing is bringing more attention to them. So, look, in the race, there's only one winner when it comes to this, only one primary winner. And so there's no reason, if I were Trump, I would have done the exact same thing. I'm sure Fox is pretty disappointed because I'm sure the ratings are going to get a hit because I think everybody loves the fireworks that Trump brings to the party. And one thing we know is that there won't probably be any name calling at this event. So it'll be interesting to see actually how many people cover it. And I'm just excited to hear Doug Berman.
Exactly. I mean, it's interesting because there will be some people who get a national platform who the American people really don't know.
I'm really disappointed though. Elaine, sorry to cut you off, but I'm really disappointed didn't make it. Perry Johnson.
I am genuinely disappointed that Larry Elder didn't make it.
Well, yeah, that's true.
As you know, he's a good friend of ours, and he's a national talk show radio host, TV host. He says some very thought-provoking things. You and I have both interviewed with him. Yeah. I mean, probably 100 times between the two of us. And he's a disruptor. He's a thought provoker. And I think that he brings a point of view to the conversation that would be interesting for the American people to learn about. So I think he's not there on the donor piece. But anyway, I'm glad that people are going to get to meet all of the candidates who have at least qualified.
Yeah. It should be interesting.
Hey folks, Elaine Parker here from Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Here's important news. Forecasters from the University of Arizona warn that 2023 will be a very active hurricane season, and they're asking people to get prepared. They expect the number of major hurricanes this year to be similar to 2017, which saw the extremely intense and damaging hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. The time to prepare is now. How bad can it get? When Hurricane Ida hit the Gulf Coast, it destroyed countless homes and left many without access to food and clean water. Millions lost power, and some for weeks. The floods that followed the hurricane washed out roads and made it impossible for grocery stores to restock their shelves. But what if you didn't have to rely on FEMA to provide for your family during a crisis? The answer is simple. Be prepared with emergency food kits from 4 Patriots. Their long-lasting and delicious food options are specially designed to provide you and your loved ones with the sustenance you need when you need it most. 4 Patriots survival food kits are hand-packed in the USA. They last up to 25 years. They come packed inside covert storage totes, include a wide variety of delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And they're backed by thousands of 5-star customer reviews. 4 Patriots survival food is not just for natural disasters, because in today's world of uncertain supply chains and unpredictable emergencies, It's more important than ever to have a backup plan. Whether it's a temporary power outage, a winter blizzard, or rising food costs, you can rest easy knowing that you have a reliable source of food to see you through. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use code STREET to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including our emergency food supply kits designed to last up to 25 years. Just go to 4patriots.com and use code STREET to get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriots survival food. That's 4patriots.com. Use code STREET. So I am excited to introduce Buz Koelbel. As I mentioned, he's the president of Koelbel and Company, which was founded in 1952 and is celebrating its 71st year in business and is one of the longest continually operating real estate companies in Colorado. New company platforms include urban infill homes through Koelbel Urban Homes, low income tax credit apartments, which are called LIHTC, and over 800 plus units developed over the last 10 years. In the first phase of 180,000 square foot, its first phase of 180,000 square foot creates a revolutionary building that is part co-working space and part healthcare innovation ecosystem designed to serve as an integrator for the digital healthcare industry and attendant business. Buz, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Elaine and Alfredo, and this is always fun stuff to be able to share a few thoughts.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Buz.
Well, you've been a longtime member of Job Creators Network, been involved with us, participated in events with other small business owners. Tell us a little bit about your business. I was just reading that you're in your 71st year in business. Tell us how'd you get started? What's your story on small business?
Well, my dad was a true visionary, and he was an entrepreneur. And he was working in Denver as for a real estate salesperson, and he decided fairly quickly that he liked the ground underneath the things he was selling much more than just selling things. He wanted to create things. So 71 years ago, he started a company, and that was back when you could buy land from farmers by the acre. And but he had a very good sense about where growth was going to go in Denver, and he was very committed to creating places for, in the end, what turned out to be places for people to live, work, shop, recreate, worship, everything. So we ultimately became community developers, primarily just right here in we were Colorado centric, so we right here in Colorado.
That is great. I'm glad to hear that it was actually your dad that actually started the business and not yourself, because I was going to say, Buz, you look amazing for being 100 years old. I mean, you must be drinking from the fountain of youth, and I wanted to see where you were getting that, because so
yeah, fortunately, that was my father that started it. I've been here 46 years now, and it's even more exciting and rewarding now. I have all three of my sons working with me as well.
That's great. That's great. So really multi-generational. I mean, which is amazing. I mean, it's funny if we can focus on that for just a few seconds, because a lot of multi-generational family businesses are actually finding it more difficult to be that and to continue primarily more for kind of like the estate planning and estate taxes and stuff like that. I know Governor Nome, that was basically why she got into government, because she basically literally was going to lose the farm, basically trying to pay taxes, estate taxes. So if we could just focus a couple of minutes on that, because how are you getting through that? How are you addressing it? Because I'm sure there are a lot of businesses out there similar to yours that are multi-generational.
Yes, and I tell you, I take great pride in the fact that we are probably the exception rather than the rule to be functioning as well as we are in the third generation. And a couple of things I think are important. Fortunately, my boys who are now working with me, they got to know my father very well. So they saw him in action. They watched me in action. Your actions speak probably even louder than words, and you don't realize when the kids are younger that they're really absorbing a whole lot of things. And they all went off to college in another state. They worked at jobs in other states as well. And then I call it the dinner table DNA. Over time, they would keep asking me what we were doing and how things were going. And in the end, one by one, they all decided that maybe this is something that they would like to stay involved in. But I think one of our philosophies in the company is we are a Colorado developer. We build communities. Like I say, we build places for people to live, work, and play. And if that's the case, then, in the end, two things happen. You get to take great pride in what you can create for people and the community. And then taking lessons from actually my dad and my mom's parents, if you're part of the community, you give back to the community. And one of the rewarding things that we've been able to do is balance that out, where we help the community, we create things for the community, and then we give back to the community. We're very active in a lot of the cultural institutions and other entities here in Colorado.
Yeah, you literally are what we always say, why our small businesses all across the country are the backbone of our communities, because you really help build those communities and add to the richness of those communities. And so that is why we do what we do at Job Creators Network, right? And why you've been so supportive is, we have to defend and protect our small businesses, 30 plus million of them, across the country, that really do add to that richness. And boy, we certainly saw that during COVID, when most of our main streets had to shut down, where we all of a sudden lacked that community. And so important to hear and know that you're doing that, Buz, and we thank you for that, because I know that you add to the richness. And so, but you're also trying to do it in a state that's turned pretty crazy in terms of some of its government policies and even perspectives on free enterprise and capitalism. Give us a little bit of sense of that, because I know that's something that, I had an opportunity to talk to, or we did, to talk to Heidi Ganal, who you know well, and Kurt Henderson as well. They're very active in Colorado. But boy, it sounds like it's gone crazy.
Well, I would tell you that I feel blessed every day with the wonderful life and family that we have. But I would tell you that the shift in the state is very disheartening for me. And I would tell you, on the point of small business, I think one of the most disheartening things right now is very few elected officials, and particularly those that have shifted the direction of the state, begin to understand anything about what us employers do. They've never taken risk in their life, so they don't understand taking risk. But they've evolved into a perspective that we're the bad guy, yeah. And that if we have made money and we've created wealth, we must be a ruthless employer.
Yeah.
And what they don't understand is that the only way we're going to succeed is create a culture of people in a company that want to be here. And if we don't compete better at creating the right culture of the people in our company, then somebody else is going to have those best and brightest. And what they really don't understand is we are the ones that from ground up create jobs, nurture families and the community. And it's just disheartening that they somehow have figured out that if anything that we've gotten through some nefarious way.
Right.
And the problem is nothing could be further from the truth. We want to win, and winning means we're doing those things for the community, as I said, but it means creating a culture of people that enjoy working and helping us, because we can't do it alone, creating the things that we do in our real estate development business.
They really are creating that culture of us versus them, which is so unfortunate. Right. I mean, I can't tell you, every single small business owner that we've talked to, the word family always comes up in terms of, our employees are not employees, they're family.
Correct.
They know everything that there is to know about them, deaths, births, accidents, sicknesses. I mean, it's just amazing. And it's just like they truly, truly are blind or oblivious to that. I mean, in fact, I think, Buzz, what we should propose is a new national day where it's Bring Your Legislator to Work Day.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we need to do so they can actually understand what you all do and how important it is. And so, because it is eye-opening. I mean, I've done a couple of, I've been testifying a couple of times in front of Congress, and boy, you hear the Democrat witnesses talk about, experts that are accountants, and they talk about all the money that small business owners really are stashing away, and, these nefarious. I mean, I remember I was sitting on one, and I had one of our members sitting next to me, a small business owner. He turned to the witness to my left, to the Democrat, and he goes, "Okay, dude," he goes, "I have a deal for you." He goes, "Why don't you come over to my business? I'll open up all my books to you, 100%. And if you can find the money that you say is there, I will do what you're asking." I mean,
I can believe
it's crazy.
That. Yeah. And I think here's another thing that is equally disheartening, both on the local scene, but also the national scene. Call it the fourth branch of government, the bureaucratic regulatory state.
Yeah.
The beauty of our country is that, like I said, my dad came from nothing, started from nothing. He was an entrepreneur. He was a visionary. He took huge risk, and we continue to take risk. And the problem is that the regulatory state continues to dramatically affect the individual. The big companies, they have the money to get through it. They can find a way to navigate the regulations.
Right.
But the true people that have made America great for the last 240 years are the individuals. Not everybody is a creative entrepreneur. Some of them work for those.
Right.
But the creativity and the innovation in our country is what's made this the greatest country in the history of mankind. And through that, everybody in the United States and around the world has conveniences and luxuries and products at the lowest price possible. And every year that goes on, they're adding a regulatory layer that hurts worst those individual creative people. And pretty soon they're going to take away the incentive for them to want to innovate because it's so difficult. And that's been the beauty of our country. And I think right now we're watching a deterioration in what I call the greatest magical experiment in the history of mankind. Our founding fathers understood what the human condition was and what the human wanted to do to further themselves. And they nurtured that by virtue of everything that was written in those short few words in the Constitution. So we need to find a way to start stripping away those regulations that are diminishing all the great things and the prosperity across the board in this country that no other place around the world has. Not everybody's an entrepreneur, but they've stripped away the ability to create more and more opportunities for more people, which ultimately is prosperity and nurturing a family in the future.
Well, that's why I'm so excited, actually, Buzz. I'm heading up to Iowa on Tuesday for a field hearing with Senator Ernst on what's called the Prove It Act. It's part of really our 8-point plan that we rolled out with Newt Gingrich in the fall of last year, called the American Small Business Prosperity Plan. And Elaine, maybe you can even go through the 8 points, but one of those is this regulatory state and actually effectively trying to get rid of that one-size-fits-all regulation, which, as you know very well, Dodd-Frank, the best example that I can think of right off the bat, 2,000 community banks went out of business because they just couldn't afford the regulatory compliance costs as the big banks. The big banks were fine, and in fact, I think they liked it because it helped eliminate competition.
Right.
And I think that's what's the big business truly is now in cahoots, I think, with big government, because it's a nice way of eliminating competition. And so we're really excited with this Prove It Act, and we'll send you more information on that because, again, I think it's going to be a game changer because it really does stop this regulatory state, and it basically excludes small businesses except for on an exception basis from all of these one-size-fits-all regulations. And so I'm excited to be out there, at this field hearing, and hopefully we'll be able to garner enough support, bipartisan support in the House and in Congress to make that pass, and hopefully get the president to sign it, because this is something that I think our small businesses need. And I think the American public, not only at one of these 8 points, Buzz, but we pretty much got 75 to 80% across the board on each one of these points in a poll that we did with Scott Rasmussen and John McLaughlin. Almost 80% across the board support for this plan. And so we're really excited about that.
I am so thrilled to hear that. And to your point, in the real estate development business, we also have a home building division. When you're a local developer, not the big nationals, you need to deal with, and you want to deal with, community banks.
Right.
So when you see people at a philanthropic event or some other event, the bankers know who you are.
Yep.
The large bankers, we're just another file and a number. And I think it was tragic what happened to all the smaller community banks. And, it's kind of the corporate cronyism thing,
100%.
whether it's banks or other large corporations. In the end, they just embedded in them is, well, they can win because they have the money to work with the regulations. But I have to tell you that not being able to deal with the community banks like we used to, they all had to merge to be able to afford the regulatory state for them. It's really sad, and it takes away part of the beauty of what we had in a community, because the banks were community and they loaned to us. We developed in the community, and they're starting to that has been deteriorating pretty rapidly over the last 15 years or so.
Well, and quite frankly, Buzz, that's why I take, a very different position than, seems to be the biggest spokesperson for mergers now of banks is this Kevin O'Leary. He calls himself Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank. Every single time he opens his mouth, he talks about how we just need to merge all these small and regional community banks, and we should really only have 6 to 8 banks. I mean, that's Japan, that's Canada. I mean, that's not the U.S. I mean, if it weren't for the small community and regional banks, I mean, our small businesses wouldn't exist. I mean, as you know, they were truly the heroes in the Paycheck Protection Program during COVID, because they're the ones that actually were working 24/7 to get those loans out to our small businesses. The big banks ended up participating at the very end. They came in kicking and screaming. We were very much involved with that, as you know, with Secretary Mnuchin. But man, if it hadn't been for those community banks, we'd be looking at a whole different economy right now.
Oh, absolutely. And as long as we're talking about the destruction of government policies, probably don't know if I really want to share this, but the Great Recession was caused by all of the nurturing and furthering of wrong policies in the financial system.
Oh yeah,
including, and most importantly, they were trying to put people in homes that hadn't gotten to the point where they could justify it and afford it. So they were doing these subprime, no doc loans, all of those things. Their heart may have been in the right place, but you have to allow the system to work, and people need to be able to buy a home, but they have to do it the right way. And that caused the Great Recession among a lot of policies. We take enormous risk in this business. We went from 140 employees to 9 between 2007 and 2010.
Wow.
And because, the market and the economy absolutely stopped and it went off a cliff, and real estate was probably, and particularly home building, was probably one of the worst that got affected.
Yeah.
And we almost didn't make it. But you know what? You get up and you fight every day. And I wasn't going to let the great thing that we had going here, but it was very painful. And again, a lot of the elected officials don't begin to understand the sleepless nights and the strife you go through. And the beauty of it is I was able to, over time, then when the market turned around, actually hire back some of the people that had worked for us.
Yeah.
But the only way we could survive is to dramatically constrict.
I was actually one of the small little developers here in Georgia that didn't make it. I did pay 100% of my invoices and my bills. I did do that, but we couldn't survive the hit that the whole economy took.
Let me tell you a quick story because it just happened. Yes, it finished up yesterday. We had the U.S. Amateur Golf Tournament here at Cherry Hills Country Club that we belong to here in Denver. And when you watch a lot of these 18 to 24, 25-year-olds through enormous hard work, fortitude, persistence, tenacity, discipline, when you watch what they're able to accomplish on the golf course, it was so inspiring. But as I was walking around watching this talent, I said to myself, all of those things, hard work, tenacity, fortitude, persistence, tenacity, those are the things that are important for success in any discipline. So it's not just sports. And what they're taking away is the understanding that there is a competition out there and there are free markets, and all of those things allow you to succeed maybe better than the next guy. But it was just a simple thought process that just what those kids were doing is exactly what the smart, entrepreneurial, innovative, creative people in this country have done for 240 years. And we need to be able to get back to that. But it was so fun watching this. And it just struck me when I was watching them, how similar that is to everything, particularly in small businesses. Yeah. You have to be that way. Large businesses get big enough that they got to get a machine going and they can roll through it. Small businesses can't. They have to have all of those personality traits to get through. And that's how you create the things that work in a community.
I love hearing Buzz's story. And part of it's because, Buzz, last year you called me on the phone and said, and you had this disheartened tone in your voice as you're describing some of the issues now. And you said, I went on an international trip and I had a thought and it's bugging me and I've got to get it out on paper. And I think we can make this video. And so I got my creative people on the phone with you and they listened to everything you had to say and very similar things that you just said now. And we created this amazing video called The Miracle of America. We've got over 1 million views on it. And then you called me and said, I've got a sequel idea. I want to do a part 2. And this one was fun too, because I love the name. It's America Works Because America Works. And or America Works. And the whole tagline is Because America Works. Tell us a little bit about the thought behind all of that, because it was so creative and it was such a great iterative process with you. I mean, you were part of the editing of the actual script. I mean, you were right in there with my creative team doing everything on a weekly basis.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning it, and we'll make sure they get a link to it at some point during this little podcast here. But no, I had the blessing of having 2 really terrific trips over a short period of time. I went to Machu Picchu 1 year, and a couple years later, we went to Egypt and did a fabulous tour of all the antiquities. And as I was reflecting on both of those trips, I thought, how in the world did they build Machu Picchu? And then how, the most classic is the pyramids, but there's so many things in Egypt. How did these things get done? Well, it was done back in the historical days. You had rulers and you had peasants or serfs or workers, and they did all the work for the people that were the rulers. And all of a sudden, it occurred to me, it's something I've always been passionate about, that America is exceptional. And it's a lot of things we've talked about earlier today, about the great things that America's done to provide everything in the world, and particularly our country. I thought, hey, we've got to expose people to this, and particularly the younger generation. So I said, let's go ahead and do something that will cater to all ages, but help explain that America is exceptional and it's a miracle, and we need to continue to nurture that, and we're losing it if we don't. And then I sent it to all of my friends and acquaintances. It got a lot of views, and then I started reflecting on it again, another thing. And I thought, again, we've talked some about this today, but the reason America is so good, because people here work. Mm-hmm. and some want to climb the ladder and do better and go on their own. But, I was driving around the street. If you just drive around the street every day, look around, 70% of the cars on the road that day are doing something to serve other people, which is all of us in the community. You'll see all the plumbing trucks or the landscape people or any of the, just look around and flash on the fact these people get up every morning to nurture themselves, to make enough money, to have a stable family, but all that work is providing services to us. So it occurred to me that America works because America works. And I think people don't understand what, again, I'll get back to some of the policies in Washington, D.C. and even locally. They're trying to empower people not to work. Well, when you empower people not to work, which means you either provide them more money, not to work, all the things that we could talk about, but what that does is that steals the human dignity that people get when they have a job. It steals one of the most important things in life. That's a sense of accomplishment and a purpose in life. And all of those things are the things that nurture, Alfredo, as you said earlier, nurture a family. No. So if you have a stable family that lives in a nice home, in a nice community, it's a permanent home, what all of those combination of things you get by working is you get better families, better communities, and you multiply that, and that gets you a better society. And that's the world that we lived in for many years. And that was the world I lived in when I was a young kid. I was a very happy kid. I was optimistic because there was nothing they were teaching me or telling me that didn't give me an idea that I could go accomplish something in life. And they're robbing some of the most important things in people's lives. Those things I mentioned, human dignity, sense of accomplishment, sense of purpose. And that's the thing that creates great families and a community and a society. And that's one of the things that's really disheartening to me. But that was also the basis for America is exceptional and America works because America works. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And I take huge pride in how those things turned out. I'm working on some thoughts on a new one I'll share with you a little later as well.
We look forward to it. I'm just so glad you called us and shared that with us and provided us the opportunity to make that video, because I do think that both videos have a great message in them. And I think it's worth it for all Americans to see it. And we will post the link when this episode hits.
Let me add this to that. I have a lot of organizations I get involved with. But to me, I thought this was a direct hit at the epicenter of what Job Creators Network does. And I thought you were the best ones to really help me capture what we ultimately were able to do. And I'd like to get to 10 million views and have half of those or more be some younger kids that are starting to get enlightened about how blessed and lucky they are to live in this country. And we need to be able to keep that.
Yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely, Buzz. As you know, last year we actually kicked off a campaign with the help of 4 of our wonderful Republican governors. Governor Kemp, Governor Ducey, Governor Reynolds. Actually, 5 is Governor Youngkin and Governor Noem. The Great Opportunity Project, because exactly to what you were talking about, that is what our country was really founded on. This promise of opportunity for all, right? Never was it equal outcome. I don't think that was ever promised, but definitely equal opportunity. And I think that's what makes this country so wonderful. I mean, you remember when I was out there several years ago, I talked about my background and my story. I mean, my mom was a housekeeper. My dad was a tailor. I mean, my mom and I used to go around on trash days collecting aluminum cans and newspapers, out of trash cans and taking it to the YMCA and cashing that in. And that was our grocery for the week. And so to go to that, from that to where I am today and having these conversations with incredible folks like yourself and working with, the highest levels of government. I mean, only in this country does that opportunity really happen. And so the Great Opportunity Project is something that we launched, and maybe our humble attempt to try to even change our party name from the Grand Old Party to the Great Opportunity Party, because that's really what I think we are about. And I think those are the values that really encompass what we believe in.
Love that. So on that point, let me share another story with you that was truly one of the most awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping things I have ever seen in my life. True story. Um, I had another wonderful opportunity for a great trip. We went to Memphis, and we saw a lot of things in Memphis, the history of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, blues, soul, all that. But one afternoon, we got to spend a couple of hours with Rick Smith, Fred Smith's son of FedEx.
No.
And that night at 10 p.m., we went out to the airport for 3 hours until 1 a.m. and watched what they do to process 300,000 packages per hour.
Wow.
And you heard the story of FedEx and Fred Smith. He started out with 22 very small Falcon jets and tried to make this idea work, was on the edge of bankruptcy for quite a while, but he knew and was committed to this idea. We stood there and watched 777s and 767s land on the runway, unload, take them, sort them, and we saw in their sorting facility where they processed 300,000 packages an hour. And I came away from that and I said, Fred Smith was the modern day Henry Ford or the modern day Ray Kroc or the modern day Walt Disney. When you look at now what he created, 580,000 jobs. And I think people take for granted the fact they see a FedEx truck 5 or 6 times every time in their car. They don't understand all the benefits that we've received by Fred Smith's wonderful ideas. And I said, that is quintessential innovative, creative America. And he's benefiting people now all around the world. But that to me is the current example of what can happen in this country if you let it happen.
Yeah. And we both Elaine and I are fortunate enough to work for another great American dream story, Bernie Marcus, who founded the Home Depot. 450,000 employees today in this country. And, you know, I always tell people he started with 2 stores at 55 years old in Atlanta. And so many great stories of him really kind of to your point, just from one day to the next, not knowing if he was going to make it as a small business owner and look at it today. And again, just a wonderful country that allowed that opportunity. You know, someone who had a vision for something at, 50 plus,
yes,
start something. I mean, it's just truly, truly amazing. And so, and even that story with Fred Smith, even going back further, I understand he actually got a D plus. That was a college paper that the professor said, "You're crazy. This will never work."
That's right. But no, and I'm delighted you mentioned Bernie because you know that story a lot better than I am. But those are 2 classic stories of innovators, but they had to stick with it. They were committed to their vision. And now, both of them have close to or over 500,000 employees. Those are the jobs. And not everybody wants to be that entrepreneur, but he's providing, again, that wherewithal and the prosperity for even individuals that work for him to maintain the kind of lifestyle that they want to achieve.
I love Bernie's stories too. It's very similar. He's shared with me many times how, they were struggling to make payroll. They were struggling to pay their suppliers. He said they would go to a mailbox and forget to put the stamp on. So he could just buy a few more days. They actually contracted with some of their paint suppliers to get empty paint cans so that they could look like they had massive amounts of inventory on all of those, stacked all the way to the ceiling, just so it looked like they had inventory and it looked like things were happening and they were selling a lot, because you couldn't have empty shelves and have customers come in. They'd leave thinking you were going out of business. And I'm sure there were many times where Bernie thought they were going to go out of business, but here we are today, and the Home Depot is, a household name. I mean, everybody shops there. There's one on, every corner. I've got 3 right in my, 5-mile radius of me. It's pretty amazing.
Well, you think about it, Fred Smith did the same thing. He literally went around and asked his employees if they could hold their paychecks for a week. Some could, some couldn't. He was doing the same thing. But when you're a visionary and you're committed to your ideas and you know they're going to work, those are two of the classic stories in recent American history that really prove what can happen in this country and how many people in society that it benefits. They're just remarkable. I get chills thinking about stories like that.
I think this takes me back to probably one of my favorite movies of all times. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you think about it, a lot of people don't know that Ray Kroc started McDonald's when he was 52 years old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so you can, it doesn't matter what age you're at, if you're committed to doing something, and I think that commitment that Bernie and Fred Smith had, that's the root of what makes America great. And that's what we have to keep going in the future. And it's disheartening when people want to dismiss those kind of successes as people that are maybe ruthless or whatever. And it's just, nothing could be further from the truth.
Absolutely. Well, Buz, thank you so much for joining us on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. I appreciate your insights. I love your video ideas, so keep them coming. And for those of you listening, you can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thanks again.